In this video, we're going to be talking about how to create a brand new Active Directory. Now what that means is we are going to be creating a brand new domain controller, and that domain controller is going to be the very first domain controller in a brand new domain in a brand new forest. Now if those domain and forest terms don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to you, then this is probably the scenario you're looking for. So let's go ahead and see what it looks like. So I have here my domain controller, and the very first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and log into it. And under Server Manager, I'm going to first look at the network properties. So under local server and the IP, Ethernet 0. Excuse me, let me make that a little bit bigger. There we go. So we'll check out the Ethernet properties, and we will see that I have an IP address, in this case 192.168.100.10, the appropriate subnet mask 255.255.255.0, and a default gateway. The default gateway isn't actually doing anything in this case because this is on an isolated network. However, if it wasn't on an isolated network, then this would allow me to get access to the internet. Additionally, I see I have a preferred DNS server listed, which is 127.0.0.1. That is the loopback address for this server, because when we make this a domain controller, we're also going to make it a DNS server. If that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you, just follow along with that and it will make sense before long. All right, so I'm going to cancel that because I'm not making any changes. And then back to Server Manager, we'll see I've already named this DC number DC1. However, it's currently in a workgroup. So I'm now ready to install Active Directory. In order to do that, I need to add the role. I can do that a couple of different ways. My preferred one is to come up to Dashboard and just click Add Roles and Features. This walks us through a nice little wizard. We'll go ahead and click Next, Next, Next. And then under the server roles, I want Active Directory Domain Services. ADDS is the actual Active Directory features. When I check the box, it pops up this little window saying, hey, there's some additional features you might want to add, specifically the ADDS, the Active Directory module for PowerShell, the tools for Active Directory Admin Center, and then also a checkbox for including the management tools. We'll just say go ahead and add features, and then next, 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 and install. So this is now installing the Active Directory features, and we will probably fast forward through this to get to the next step. All right, thanks to the power of video editing, we fast forwarded through that. We are now at the end here. It says that the install is complete. It tells me Active Directory Domain Services. Additional steps are required to make this a domain controller. I could click this right here. I'm going to hold off on that just really quickly. We'll see that there are a result of all of the install options, and then I can click Close. So like I said, I could have clicked that hyperlink that was listed there, or I can come up here to this flag and I see I have a notification. If I click on that, I see there is my Promote Server to Domain Controller option. So I'll go ahead and click that, and we'll start with our deployment wizard. So up to this point, we installed the features that are necessary for Active Directory. Now we are creating our Active Directory. All right, so deployment configuration wizard, very first step is, what is our deployment operation? How do we want to configure this? Do we want to configure this as a new domain, a new DC in an existing domain? So is there an existing domain that's already out there that we want to join? In this case, no. Do we want to create this as a new domain in an existing forest? So is there an existing forest out there that we want to add a domain into? Again, in this case, no. And then option number 3, add a new forest. It's also adding a new domain at the same time, and that is the option we want. So I'm going to go ahead and check that radio button, and then it asks me for the domain name I want to create. I'm going to go ahead and call this test2016.local. It's just a test environment that I'm creating. It doesn't have any actual standing. A lot of places this will be your company name. So for instance, if I worked for a company called ADI, whatever ADI, Active Directory Infrastructure, and they had a domain called ADI.com, I may create the root domain to be ADI.com. However, because this is a test environment and I'm running this on a 2016, server 2016, I will name it test2016.local. So next. Gives me various options as far as the forest functional level and the domain functional level. Unless you have a reason specifically in your environment not to choose the latest, choose the latest. In this case, 2016 is the latest for both of these. What capabilities do I want to be on this? Do I want this to also be a DNS server? Yes, almost always you will want your domain controllers to be DNS servers. Do I want this to be a global catalog? Well, I don't actually have a choice there because it's the very first domain controller and there has to be at least one global catalog. And the read-only domain controller, again, that's not available because there has to be at least one other domain controller for it to be read-only. Then asks me for a DSRM password or recovery mode. This is the scenario where if your computer has completely crashed and you need to recover from backups, what password do we use in order to recover from backups? And that's what we type in here. You will want to make sure that that password is documented somewhere extremely safe and that everybody in your IT department knows where that password is. All right, next asks me about DNS delegation. I'm just going to go ahead and say next. It will verify the NetBIOS name. Basically, it will look around in your network to see if there is something else with the same domain name that you specified. Depending on your environment, this may take a couple of minutes. Mine is done, so next. It will then ask me what paths or where on this computer do I want to store the various Active Directory files. Almost always you will leave those to the default C drive. Only in rare circumstances would you change those to something else. Gives me an option to be able to review my configuration and even create a PowerShell script that I could then run at a later date. This will come in handy if you need to do something in an automated fashion amongst multiple machines. So I'll go ahead and say next. It will run through its various prerequisites, make sure it has everything it needs, and then we'll say next, and the install will continue. All right, so it does give me some warnings here. Let's see, let's look at this first one here. Windows 2016 domain controllers have defaults for the security setting named allow cryptography algorithms compatible with NT4, which means the passwords may not be as secure as possible. This is a warning. This is not a critical issue. You can go through and you can change this along with the other warnings down here. However, they are not blocking our install. I'll go ahead and say install. And we will go ahead and fast forward until it is done, until it is rebooted and is ready for us to log in. All right, and so once the install completed, it automatically rebooted on us for the install in order to complete. And if you notice, the reboot process took a little bit longer than it normally does. That's because it has to go through and start setting up all the Active Directory policies and then applying those to the local machine. At this point, we now get onto the machine and we hit Control Delete, and we will notice that we are now logging into the Test 2016 domain as the administrator. So that was it. Go ahead and log in here, and we are now members of the new 2016 or Test 2016 domain, which we can confirm by looking under Server Manager under the local server, and we will see Workgroup is now domain, specifically the test 2016.local domain.